Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Nigeria is one of the largest and oldest oil producers in Africa. The oil and gas sector is one of the most important sectors in the country's economy, accounting for more than 90% of the country's exports and 80% of the government's revenue. On Friday, December the 27th, 2019, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, NNPC, and its investment partners Shell, Total, and Eni signed a $10 billion deal for the construction of Train 7 of the Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Project. Joining us now to discuss this and the outlook for the oil and gas industry in 2020 is a leading oil and gas analyst and petroleum engineer, Dr. Bala Zaka. Bala, good morning.
Thank you.
Good to have you again on the morning show.
Thank you and Happy New Year.
Yeah, same to you. Yesterday, we still talked about this development, the Train 7 liquefied natural gas project, considering the excitement that it had generated, among industry stakeholders and the general public, and the advantages that Tony Atta, the MD of Nigerian LNG, has outlined. But what's your take? Do you think that this is really a big deal? And then, after talking about that, maybe you also go beyond this item of, the Train 7 of the LNG to give us an idea of what the outlook for the oil and gas industry in Nigeria is likely to be in 2020, considering the strategic importance of that industry to the Nigerian economy.
Yeah, thank you, and Happy New Year once more.
Thank you.
We all saw it. The final investment decision, to get the Train 7 on board or to bring it on stream is really something fantastic. It's worthy of praise and emulation. We've been waiting for it for quite some time. But there is this saying that never late than never, to many of us, honestly, it's a fantastic idea. It's something great. It's going to put Nigeria on that pedestal that we've always hoped to see Nigeria sit. And like you rightly said in your prologue, Nigeria is not only the continental hub of Africa in just oil and gas, but in so many things. So this idea of Train 7 is something nearly everybody, the global community, the oil and gas industry globally received it with excitement. And we hope this time around we are going to see the practical dividends. And when I talk about the practical dividends, we will want to see how it will impact on the economy of Nigeria positively. It has always been doing that, and I don't have any reservations or any reason to feel we're not going to achieve so much for Nigeria this time around.
All right, looking at it closely, the question that will be asked, because when you just mentioned that the DGA had just actually spoken and celebrated this, but why did it take so long for the final investment decision? 12 years, if I'm correct. Why did it take so long to actually come to fruition?
To be honest, when you talk about policies in Nigeria and when you talk about laws and the ways they are implemented, it depends on who you're talking to. I've had a reason to discuss, on inclusive economy and why we're not having an inclusive economy. And different people gave their different reasons, depending on who you talk to. But as far as I was concerned, I just answered it straight away, and I said, it's because we also don't have an inclusive democracy. And because we don't have an inclusive democracy, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have an inclusive focus in how we manage our economy. So that's the only way I can look at it. 1,001 things can be adduced as the reason, just like the petroleum industry bill. Along the line, maybe in the course of this discussion, we will also touch on that. Anybody can come up and say, but we came up with the idea of petroleum industry bill ages ago. Why is it that it has not been passed into law? Somebody will come and say, okay, there was a time Nigeria conceived the idea of the trans-Saharan gas pipeline when I was probably in primary school or secondary school. Then the dream was this same gas we're talking about now that we want to harness, The same gas was what we wanted. You know, from this same Nigeria, the geographical entity called Nigeria has not changed. Then, but we had visionary leaders then who wanted to harness this gas, pass it through North Africa, through the Mediterranean Sea, and to supply Europe. You can imagine what would have happened if we had brought that into fruition. So anybody can also ask question, what is still happening to the West African gas pipeline? What's happening to the refineries? So 1,001 reasons can be adduced. But the good thing is we are on the right path now. We've decided that we've been probably relaxed or docile or sleeping for too long as the giant of Africa, and we want to lead Africa now and probably participate so much in the global community.
Well, I mean, still on the LNG, we'll still open up the discussion to talk about the outlook. There are some Nigerians who have expressed the view that the 49% stake being held on behalf of the federal government by the NNPC.
Yes.
And Nigeria is looking for money. Why don't we just sell off that 49%, make about $20 billion straight away, and then use that money to fix rail, to fix roads, to address infrastructural challenge, instead of insisting on going to borrow some $39.96 billion. What do you think?
To be honest with you, unfortunately, I'm saying unfortunately because I belong to a very different school of thought when it comes to the management of national assets. My perspective is different as far as management of national assets is concerned. When you talk about national assets, I am not that person who just believe we want to hold on to something bogus and call it a Nigerian thing. No. But I want to also make those on the other side to understand that there was a time we had leaders who felt we needed to have our own airline, not just to show it, to just showcase it, but to use it as a means of revenue generation. We needed to have our own railways. We needed to have our own sports. We needed to have our own universities, and so many other things. So when it comes to national assets, as far as I'm concerned, I belong to the school of thought that feels as an emerging economy, Nigeria still needs to hold on to national assets, but most importantly, manage her national assets. Because if we didn't have leaders, that came up with that idea and vision, probably nothing will have existed today. And it is from that perspective that I strongly feel that we mustn't cede that percentage. The only reason is because after you and I, my hope and belief is that Nigeria will still be there. And it is our duty to plan for generation yet unborn. What I know and many people feel Nigeria lacks is management culture. But coming up with ideas, coming up with intuition, putting things online has never been the problems of Nigeria. But the major problem we've always had is how to manage and make sure we bequeath or transfer a good legacy to succeeding generations. Whether you talk about it in sports, in health, in education, or in politics, we see it. The people come up with great ideas. Then during a given dispensation, everything is destroyed. So to cut my own story short, I am in support of Nigeria still holding on to national assets, not just as a monster asset, but to be managed properly and to have it at the back of our minds that after us, there will be generations that will come.
All right. Since you're speaking about the energy, let's talk about other energy projects and how soon should we expect them to come to fruition? Because we know that the BRAS and the Olokola Energy Project was actually initiated by the Obasanjo administration back in 2003.
Yes.
And we saw some progress in 2004. How far have we gone with that right now? Where are we with that now?
To be honest, after a while, so many things went wrong in Nigeria. And that was why I said, at a point, somebody asked me a question, why is it that we are not having an an inclusive government, an inclusive economy, and a focused one. And I said it's because we don't have an inclusive democracy. And to me, as far as I'm concerned, we practice the democracy of exclusion. We practice the democracy of vengeance, and probably the democracy of emasculation. And as long as we continue to practice that kind of democracy, at the national level, we may not be able to lead. And what that simply means is this. We have a system of governance in Nigeria where if a particular dispensation comes in today, right, that dispensation, this time political dispensation, can assemble all the brains.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News Channel. Still with us in our Lagos studio is Dr. Bala Zaka, an oil and gas industry analyst. Dr. Zaka, sorry, it looks like, you were cut off. About local LNG and brass LNG in response to the question asked by Aaron.
Correct.
And you were trying to explain why we seem not to have made much progress with those two natural gas projects, whereas the Nigerian LNG seems to be doing much better.
Yeah, and you see, like I said, we were talking also about management of national asset, and I said I belong to the school of thought that feels we should hold on to national asset. But when you look at things, again, from the success of the Nigerian LNG and how it was managed, many people will knock me down, and they have their reasons. When we allowed the partnership, of the Nigerian LNG, we brought in stakeholders. We saw
Shell,
everything.
Total,
yes, and the rest. We saw things working. So what that also tells me is this. In as much as people like me feel we should hold on to national assets, but honestly, in national interest, if we continue this way, then we are likely to lose virtually everything about our sovereignty as Nigeria. Because then one day we need people to come and manage our politics for us. We need people to come and manage our health system for us. We need people to come and manage our education for us. So when you look at the success of LNG and you look at now Olokonla and you now look at the brass LNG, then you are likely to probably begin to see the Nigerian factor, which ordinarily should have been what will make us to be very proud, to be very focused, to look ourselves as an all-inclusive country and to have an all-inclusive economy.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, let's open this up now. I had asked you earlier that we'll talk about the outlook for the oil and gas industry in 2020 in Nigeria. What do you see happening? What are the factors that we need to watch out for? Are there risks and uncertainties? Yes. Or, it's just going to be a year of profit in that sector for Nigeria, considering, the expectations of the Nigerian government?
To be honest with you, let me look at it from this perspective. When you talk about the oil and gas, you're basically talking about an international commodity. And when you talk about an international commodity like the oil and gas, you're talking about a commodity whose price is not determined by a particular country or a particular cartel. The price of crude oil and gas is determined by the interplay of activities I can best describe as externalities. And when you talk about externalities, then you need to look at things that are beyond one country or things that are beyond a particular cartel. And in discussing that, the first thing I do most of the time is to look at the global picture, because we're talking about a global product here. Today, as we speak, there is this planned sanction, that is being imposed on Iran. Iran is a member of OPEC. Iran is having so much endowment of crude oil. If that sanction works, then it is likely to affect production. If it affects production, it is going to affect the economy of Iran. But most importantly, it is going to affect a member of that cartel that Nigeria belongs to called OPEC. That's one. We also have issues with Venezuela. that may be political, but somehow it's also economic, and it's going to affect that member of that cartel called OPEC. There is presently a sanction on 6 key vessels of Venezuela. That sanction is hitting hard on Venezuela. If it continues, Venezuela will be forced to cut back production. If it does not continue, then Venezuela can just decide to ignore virtually everything, produce as she likes, and probably decide to distort the market. That will have concerns to OPEC, because we belong to OPEC as a cartel, and it's going to affect the global oil and gas industry and the global oil price. Then something internationally also that has to do with the oil and gas industry has to do with recent signals, from Goldman Sachs, which is a very strong investment banker, now saying financing of activities, principally, oil production, and mining will not be supported in the Arctic region. And when you talk about Arctic region, maybe the best thing is to call a name of a place. I don't really like mentioning. When you mention places like Alaska, you have so much potential there. And that also is coming because there is this conflict, those who are concerned about global warming, the melting of ice, and other things are feeling there is a need to do something so that one day we will not suffer. The sea level is rising and the rest. So because of that, funding is going to be reduced. And once funding is reduced, then production will be affected. Because at a point, the U.S. was almost becoming a next exporter. So all these activities will shape how things will look like in 2020 for the oil and gas industry. But when you cascade it down to Nigeria, we finished talking about the global side, which must have effect on the cartel.
Did you refer to the crisis in the Middle East? Yes, you mentioned Iran.
Yeah, I mentioned Iran, and I didn't want to go there far, but let me... Okay, on Iran...
Maybe rise in inventories and shale oil threat.
Yes, okay, exactly. Let me also now go into the other side. The U.S. is feeling that Iran needs to be sanctioned because Iran is supporting terrorism, and also Iran is still stubborn about doing something on nuclear armaments curtailment. But Iran is now saying the reason why the U.S. is imposing that sanction is because the U.S. wants to oppress Iran, make sure Iran does not produce, so that the prices of crude oil can go up, and it will help the production of shale oil. So, but I didn't want to go that side because, like I also always say, it depends on who you're talking to. As far as Iran is concerned, it is not because of terrorism, it is not because of other things, but U.S. wants to make sure they show up the price and support the production of their kind of crude oil that we call shale oil, which they have already successfully carried out research and development and have modified their refineries to be able to take shale oil as a feedstock. So, but I didn't initially want to go because it looks a bit political, though it will have a global effect on the global oil and gas industry.
Is that there are also political risks within the global space.
A lot.
Yeah, but you were going to talk about Nigeria.
Yes, we are now cascading down to Nigeria. In the case of Nigeria, certain things have happened in 2019 that will definitely shape the outlook of the oil and gas industry in 2020. And some of them are, one, the finance bill of 2019. The second one has to do with deep offshore and inland basin production sharing contracts amendment bill, which is now an act. Then another one has to do generally with what is happening between River State and Delta State, River State and Bayelsa State, when you look at a very big field, a prolific one that we call Soku oil field. I will explain all of them. Then the other one again has to do with what the governor of River State was planning to do about taking a given percentage of a concession in Ogoni land, because Ogoni has been generally lying quiet since 1993. There has been no production, but it's also a very, very prolific field and has so much potential. Then you also have slight security issues that are rearing their heads at the moment, because the Niger Delta has relatively been a very quiet place. But the recent strike on the residence or the home country of the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, will send a wrong signal to likely investors that will want to come there and drill. You also have others that have to do with the petroleum industry bill. Remember, it has not been passed yet. Then, of course, the new GMD looks vibrant, looks strong, and he said he was going to fix 4 refineries and will come up with 2 condensate refineries. All these were pronouncements. Some of them were reforms. But between you and I, they will shape the complete outlook of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. When we start explaining them, especially the government reforms, you will see how they will impact directly or indirectly, but they will hit the oil and gas industry.
All right, sir. Nigeria budgeted for fuel subsidy in 2019.
Yes.
305 billion.
Yes.
And in the 2020 budget, 450 billion was actually earmarked for fuel subsidy. How sustainable is this going forward? And you just mentioned the refineries.
Yes.
Now, if we're to backtrack a little bit.
Yes.
Ibe Kachiko, the then
yes.
Minister of Petroleum,
yes.
said by 2019, Nigeria will be running in full capacity. Now, Mr. Kyari has said by 2022, Nigeria will have its refinery running in full capacity.
Yes.
Would we ever see a day where Nigeria, when would we have one refinery even running in full capacity?
Yes,
or even have capacity.
Okay. As you're talking like this also, I remembered in those days, the former petroleum minister, Diziani, Alison Madueke, in an international global conference called OTC, Offshore Technology Conference in Houston, Texas, said before 2014, also, the petroleum industry bill was going to be passed into law. You know, to be honest, we make pronouncements that I wouldn't want to say are careless, but are not well thought through. And that is not good for the credibility and the image of Nigeria. And let me start by picking the points one after the other. I will come to subsidy. To me, subsidy is an economic cushioning concept that is accepted globally. So if subsidy as a universally economic cushioning concept is not working in country A, it doesn't mean it will not work in country B. Just like democracy. Democracy is a political system of governance. And that simply means if democracy does not work in country A, it doesn't mean if country B manages democracy, democracy will not thrive. We have in Africa the same democracy that we can define as a globally or universally accepted governing concept. We have countries within Africa where you have leader or leaders going for 3, 4, 5 terms, but we still have democracy. So that's the way subsidy is. Personally, looking at Nigeria as an emerging economy, looking at even the population, the GDP, and so many things, all the macroeconomic indices, I will want Nigerians to have subsidy. I would want us to enjoy subsidy because Nigerians are truly groaning under pains. Let me give you a just raw and a careless example, you know, or an ordinary example. My mother still does not know that Alex Ikweme is dead. But we know Alex Ikweme is dead. Shagari is dead. My mother doesn't know. But if you increase the price of...
Some people still think that the president of Nigeria is Yakubu Gowon.
Exactly. But if you increase the price of petrol by 1 naira, my mother will be conscious of that. She will know about it. In fact, I told somebody, I said, even Boko Haram in Sambisa forest will feel the heat.
Dr. Zaka, sorry, I will have to interject you here. We need to take another short break. But you still have to address the question he raised.
Is
it sustainable, the subsidy regime?
If we manage
the figures. Anyway, we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Morning Show here on the Arise News Channel. Still with us is Dr. Bala Zaka, an oil and gas industry analyst and petroleum engineer. Now, Dr. Zaka, before we went on break, you were responding to the question raised on the issue of subsidy.
Okay, this is the way I want to explain it. You see, if you look at it, between 1965 and 1989, Nigeria was able to construct 4 refineries. We had 4 refineries. We had the first water refinery in 1965. Around 1978, we had the Warri refinery. Around 80, we had the Kaduna refinery. Around 89, we had the second Port Harcourt refinery. From 1989 to 2019, you're talking about 30 years, 30 good years. We have not been able to construct 1 additional refinery and have not been able to maintain even the ones we inherited. Whether you people accept it or not, you should expect us to experience energy crisis. It's a very, very simple answer. You cannot say the leaders of before were younger people, less educated. Then from 1989 to now, 30 years, where we have more professors, where we have more politicians, where we have people who claim to be rich, but you've not been able to construct a single refinery or maintains the one we inherited. Meanwhile, the strategic industrial sector requires energy. Strategic domestic sector requires energy, and strategic commercial sector requires energy. When people talk about this subsidy, let me also say something that is straight and clear. If you go to the filling stations today, what is happening is you will see vehicles competing for diesel and petrol with generators. If we were to have electricity, there will be glut at the filling station. I hear people saying we are subsidizing consumption. Some people have 3 or 4 or 5 cars. I am ready to have a global debate with those people. Assuming you have 4 cars, 1 vehicle brought you here to work, right? The other vehicle is likely to take your madam to some places. The other one is likely to take your kids and your nanny to places. And people will be saying they are subsidizing consumption. If they increase the price of petrol to 500 naira per liter so that they will stuff you and asphyxiate you, and you decide that you will be taking madam to the supermarket, to the children's, just to make sure you suffer, first of all, you are likely to fire 3 drivers. You are going to send these 3 drivers back to the unemployment market. For those who are saying we are subsidizing consumption because of big men that have cars, I want to let them understand, those big men are not drinking the petrol. Those big men also hire drivers. If you go to Banana Island and all those places, whoever tells you that it's only big men that are there is not telling you the truth. There are poor men, drivers, nannies coming to work there. So even if you increase the price of petrol to 500 naira per liter, believe me, by this time tomorrow, you will still be complaining. All we need is to make sure we do something about the downstream sector, because we have upstream and downstream. And I keep telling people, Nairanize the downstream, and people will not understand. Get the crude oil from the wellhead within Nigeria in Naira. Move them through train and tankers to the respective refineries, assuming they are working in Naira. Refine your crude oil in Naira for internal consumption. Distribute them to Nigerians in Naira. Generate your Naira. The first thing that will do is to free you from exchange rate differentials and the logistic burdens. And if you have electricity today, believe me, there will be glut at the filling stations. Another thing again is for Nigeria, you know, we're talking about LNG and the rest. When we unbundle NEPA, we predicated it on the availability of what? Gas to drive the gas turbines. Today, we couldn't sustain that. Even the soil relationship between PNID and the Nigerian government had something to do with making sure we treat gas so that we generate electricity. So when you look at it, Nigeria is the cause of most of these problems. No country will have raw materials and will tell you that they will not be self-sufficient in the byproducts or the materials that you will get from the processing of that raw material. Crude oil is a raw material.
You're right. We keep exporting what we do not enjoy at home.
Exactly. And
let me ask you, let me take you back to
yes.
something you said will affect the outlook. The finance bill.
Yes, reforms
which
now.
you try to break down.
Yes.
And then the deep offshore and inland basin production sharing contracts amendment bill.
Which is an act now.
Yeah, which is now an act.
The petroleum industry
how
bill.
would that make a difference? Because I know that the Senate President, Ahmed Lawan,
yes.
has been quoting the same two pieces of legislation.
Yes.
As saying, look, we should not worry about additional revenue for the Nigerian government. That on the basis of these two acts, more money will come and we'll be able to fund the budget.
Yeah, I think also I really have worries. I'm a Nigerian and I believe in my government, or I respect my government, but I have concerns with the Nigerian leadership and the way we are running things. You see, whenever you, even as a government, even as a father, if all you are after is money, 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 or revenue, you're not thinking about the partners, the relationships you have that will help you to have a win-win situation. You will grind yourself to a rock or to a cul-de-sac. The finance bill, right? I don't want to talk about the other effects that they are going to have, but I know that the finance bill has something to do with 7 taxes or thereabout.
Yes,
company income tax, personal income tax, value-added tax, capital gain tax, petroleum profit tax, then stamp duty, and custom and excise tariff. But let me even say something a little on even this stamp duty before I go, because I'm only concerned with the petroleum profit tax. Do you know, yesterday I was at a gas station or petrol station. I wanted to buy petrol, and a lady brought a POS.
Yes.
And after when I wanted to pay, she said I must pay the 50 naira.
No, the government has clarified that.
See,
the CBN has said...
Like I said, I respect my government, I appreciate, but sometimes you just lumped so many things, you know. But let me go to the one that has to do with our subject of discussions now, which is the petroleum profit tax. If you look at that petroleum profit tax, there is what we call dividend. Dividend is basically when you have your revenues, you remove all the cost of sales, you remove all the taxes. What remains now is what you want to share to those who are probably we call owners of the companies or shareholders. Dividend is supposed to be exempted from tax, because before that you have removed your profit tax and everything. But Nigerian government is now saying they have expunged Section 60 and are saying that dividend that comes to shareholders will be subjected again to 10% withholding tax. Let's be fair to ourselves. It's not fair, even though I'm a Nigerian. Let me quickly, because I wouldn't want to waste time. That is not fair. It has been passed into law. People will continue to ask questions. And one thing we need to also ask ourselves or tell ourselves, when you continue to do that, the investors will ask themselves questions. The shareholders will ask themselves questions. You've taxed everything, and petroleum profit tax, sometimes we tax up to 85%. And now you are coming again, the dividend that comes to, that's not how, to me, that's not how to generate revenue for the country. Then I want to go to the other one that has to do with the deep offshore and inland basin production sharing contract. In 1993, we knew that apart from the land and swamp of concessions that we had, we knew that we had so much potential in the deep waters, you know. Then we wanted to encourage people to come and go in and help us develop the deep water technology so that we can generate so much. And then we gave them conditions and said, when you are drilling and you get to what we call column of water, but let me just explain it in a layman's language. When you go to deep offshore, water can be as deep as 1 kilometer. Then the Nigerian government, because they wanted to encourage deep water technology, and said, when you come now, use all your money, go in there. If you are able to get oil you can remove X, Y, Z. We will give you these concessions to encourage it. But the basic ones I want to talk about was below a given depth. You know, when you get to like 1 kilometer of water depth, you know, don't pay royalties. But recently, though Nigeria planned that from 1993, after 15 years, they will review things together. And subsequently, after every five years, they will meet and review. Today, Nigeria is saying, even if you drill to 10 kilometers depth of water, you must pay 10% royalty. And some of us are saying, Nigeria does not have the technology yet. Nigeria is still young. And you want to encourage investors to come. And let me give you why some people like me are still opposed to it, even though it has been passed into law. It's just like when you were talking today, reviewing papers, you were showing Anthony Joshua, right?
Yes.
As a boxer. Everybody is saying Anthony Joshua did well. But you don't know how many people who attempted to be boxers that are dead and are in the grave. Or you see Okocha and Ronaldo and say, hey, these guys are... You don't know how many thousands have broken their legs in trying to be footballers. So it's the same way with this deep water. Some of them, I don't like mentioning companies' names. That's just one thing about it. There are a few Nigerian companies, you know, that have done well in deep waters and everything. And because they are doing well, Nigeria wants to now start charging, even when you are below 1 kilometer of water depth. They have forgotten. Nobody wants to talk about so many oil and gas companies that came to, if I can mention more than 5 that came, drilled, and they got nothing. And many of them got liquidated. So when you do things like this and you are showing people only the companies that are making money, why not mention those companies that came here, use hundreds of millions of dollars, but they got nothing? And when you go and you don't get anything, Nigeria does not give you a kobo.
Dr. Zakka, sorry to interrupt you again. We have less than a minute or thereabouts to go. But I would like you to comment on the Soku oil wells and the comment, and the politics, very briefly, because we've seen 2 governors practically abusing each other over the matter.
Yes. I think I would want the government, the national government, to come into this, because what is happening is not going to be in our own interest. We wouldn't want to see a resurgence of hostilities and war going on there. And also there is this field that Wike wanted to acquire, you know, to make sure Ogoni land is back on stream. That will have helped, but there is confusion. What we want is just peace, you know. Then recently there was an attack on the house of Mr. President.
Yes.
That the government needs to do something about it, because if they don't, others will not be allowed, other investors will be scared coming in to invest.
Thank you. On that note of having peace and stability in the Niger Delta, we have to thank you very much for coming.